Is Echo the solution to your Darkhawk, your Devil Dino, your Null problems? All of those pesky ongoing cards that keep beating you time after time after time? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to talk about Echo, the new card that's joining Marvel Snap in just a few short days. It's basically a tech card, but maybe there's a little bit more to this card than first meets the eye. So Echo is a 1/2 after your opponent plays an ongoing card here. Remove its abilities. Very interesting. It's a little bit of a proactive approach to a tech card, right? If you're looking to counter something, you got to get this card out first so that you can, maybe if with priority, take away their ongoing ability or restrict your opponent from playing there. Whereas previously, we've seen Enchantress and Rogue as ongoing counters, and they're more reactive. You have to wait until your opponent plays a card there, or you don't have priority so that you can, bam, zap those ongoing abilities. So let's get into the mechanics of Echo because there's a few things I want to talk about. All right, so first of all, despite not being an ongoing card herself, she does trigger her ability multiple times if your opponent were to play multiple ongoing cards into her location. It is not a one-time ongoing removal. So you can get quite a bit of value from this card. Maybe you even want to move it around with like Ghost Spider or something like that. So your opponent thought they were going to play there and be safe, then you move it over and bam, you get them. Another thing is that cards that are silenced by Echo, and I'm calling it silence whenever there's ability removal because that's one word compared to two. Cards silenced by Echo can be buffed with Patriot or Washington, D.C., the location that gives +3 power to cards with no abilities. Essentially, you remove the text. They have no abilities. They do now gain those buffs. Now, if your opponent thinks it's going to be tricky and they're going to bounce back that card, the silence card with Beast or Falcon or something like that, right? Well, they're going to be in a tough spot because when they get that card back to their hand, it is still going to be silenced. If they play it again, it still does not have its ability. I've experimented with Sauron to see how this would interact, and so long as the silence mechanic, the removal of an ability mechanic, remains true across all the cards, they will not regain their original ability by being bounced. If a card is played at Echo's location, then moved in the same turn, it will still lose its ability. A quick example of this is if your opponent were to say, I don't know, play Arrow and you haven't revealed the card yet, well, the card would move over, but you played it. That is actually a step in the process of a turn, right? So there's the play, there's the movement, there's the reveals. So when you play the card there, the game registers that you played it there. Some sort of trigger will occur at that location. In this instance, if your opponent plays an ongoing card at Echo's location, but then you move it with Arrow, well, it's still going to lose its ability at the brand new location. So while it seems like a pretty straightforward tech card, there's a few things to understand, but I think for the most part, you're just going to play this, and then your opponent is just not going to play their ongoing cards there, unless they're running like Red Skull or something like that, a zero deck, then that'll actually work to their benefit. But otherwise, I think it's pretty much just saying, hey, this location, no ongoing cards for you, figure it out, play them elsewhere. So some pros is that it's proactive. You get to play this on turn 1, you don't feel too bad. Another thing is that you can play it at any turn. If you play it on turn 6 with priority, you might completely shut down their turn 6 play. Like I'm talking like Null or any of those big ongoing cards like Devil Dino that people want to play on that final turn for a big power swing, and you read the situation, you play Echo at that location and remove that ability. That's insane. That will straight up win 4-8 cube games. I think that might be one of the better routes for Echo, but the other one is just playing it at a location saying, hey, you can't play here, figure it out, which kind of leads to a lockdown, like Storm, Goose, and all these sorts of things to like really shut down those decks. The most prominent one right now is probably Darkhawk, but they run Zaboo and then it discounts it to 3, and then they might be able to play it at a Goose location. So there's still that issue, but still, like if they're going to run out of space because of this Echo, there's a lot of ongoing cards in that deck. So I think it actually is going to be a pretty decent card. The problem that I have with Echo is that she's not very exciting. She's not like just that card that changes all these decks, can be, build its own archetype. Instead, it's just going to be a tech card that you throw in a couple decks. If the meta starts shifting to a lot of ongoing cards, she's going to be fantastic. She's going to be a great card. But when they're not in rotation, when they're not the top decks in the meta, when it doesn't really matter, she's not going to do a whole lot. In fact, she could completely whiff. And if you haven't built other synergies around around her, then it's not really worth being in your deck. You only have 12 cards, remind you. Like, you got to be careful with what you're choosing, what you're putting in there. So that's where the con happens for me. It's meta reliant and it's 6,000 tokens. It's being released as a Series 5 card. And that's why, quick spoiler alert, for me personally, this is a pass. And I think for most people, it probably should be a pass, unless you're really excited about this card and you think it's going to completely destroy a bunch of cards, get you to infinite. It could do that, but for me, it's a pass. Okay. Another thing is that it's situationally worse than Enchantress Rogue. The proactive nature is nice if you have priority. If you do not have priority, it's going to be that much harder to actually find value in Echo if you play it later game. Whereas Enchantress and Rogue, you can kind of do the same thing I was talking about early, denying that null, denying that Darkhawk, Devil Dino. But the thing is, if you don't have priority, Echo's not doing anything, but Enchantress and Rogue in those instances can absolutely shine and win you the game. Enchantress gets you a little bit more power on the board, denies all the ongoing abilities if they have a few stacked there, and then Rogue is going to steal it, and if it's one of those dinos, then that's great, but she's a little bit RNG reliant. So there's definitely pros and cons to each of these ongoing counters, but now there's 3 in the metagame. So it's interesting that there's a lot of options to deny ongoing abilities. But if I had to pick one to put in my deck, I would probably stick with Enchantress. So that's where I just don't know if I'd want to add Echo in instead. We're going to have to find out. But let's talk about some potential counters to Echo, and then also some deck lists that I've theory crafted up. All right, I'll keep this short and sweet because there's not a whole lot of counters to this card. Like, there's not much you can do. It's a 1/2, just normal stat line, has an ability. So what can you do with it? Well, you can Killmonger it, or you could Electra it, or you could Polaris it. Those 3 cards, destroy it, move it, etc. Like, that's things you can do with 1-drops in general, right? So I guess that's kind of a counter. I mean, if they really want to play their ongoing card there, Killmonger is a great option. And he's pretty prevalent in the meta. He's found in a lot of decks. So this could just get destroyed and then see how later it's gone. Now, it doesn't affect your ongoing cards. So you could stack armor at the echolocation to protect her if you really want to shut that lane down. But otherwise, Killmonger is probably the best counter. Other things are Red Skull, Ebony Maw, Typhoid Mary, any cards with ongoing abilities that you actually want to remove. Echo sets it up for you. So now if your opponent plays Echo and you just happen to be running that, like, that's going to be fantastic. And if a lot of people end up picking up Echo, if you're seeing it a lot in your games in the next week because it's going to be that new card, maybe it's worth building a 0 Red Skull, Typhoid Mary, that kind of deck. Now, let's get to some really cool theory crafting because there's actually some pretty interesting things we can do with this card. All right, I won't lie, I didn't really know where to go with this card because there's not a lot of direct synergies. But as I started to put some together, I was like, okay, this could actually work. I think the most obvious one being Wong, right? Wong gets countered by Cosmo. If you have Echo at the Wong location, then you cannot get Cosmo'd. So that's just great. Now, you can still get Enchantress or Rogue or something like that, so that might suck. But it is the #1 counter to Wong decks, so this kind of opens things up for them a little bit. It also takes a spot, so you can only play 2 cards to actually work with the Wong effect, which might be a little bit tricky, but it's there. Another one is Khazar because, you know, like +1 power to your 1-drop. That's great. Jean Grey is pretty nice as well because if your opponent only has ongoing cards in their hand and you have Echo and Jean Grey at a location, they have to play 1 there first, and it's going to lose its ability. That might make a very tricky situation for your opponents. Another one is Professor X because if they really want to wait till turn 6 to play those ongoing cards, but you X'd up a location on turn 5 and another location has Echo, they're very limited to where they can play. That kind of goes for like things like Storm as well. And then Valkyrie is another one that I wanted to add here because one of the biggest counters to a Valkyrie play is ongoing abilities because they retain their power. Valkyrie only adjusts the base power of a card. So now if you have an echolocation, you don't have to worry about your opponent setting up ongoing cards. You can set up ongoing cards, and then you play Valkyrie there, and you most likely win that location. Which brings me to my favorite list of the 3 here that I want to talk about. Valkyrie Control. So this is actually just a really good deck list where the idea is you play a lot of cheap things, and then on turn 6, or whenever you can, you're going to play Valkyrie, and it's just going to completely decimate your opponent's side of the board. If they've only played like 2 or 3 cards, guaranteed victory because you have 4 cards stacked there with Wasp, Ant-Man, whatever, and then it's all going to change to 3 power, and you're probably going to win the location 12-9. The biggest weakness to this was ongoing abilities, but if we put Echo there, we're going to be good. We're golden. You got Echo, you put even the Hood, so people are thinking like, what? He's not going to win this location. Daredevil, whatever else, and then you Valkyria. And the extra little bits here are Daredevil, Professor X combo, which is really nice. Jean Grey to limit our opponents from playing cards because we have so many cheap things. It's going to work no matter what. Nightcrawler and Jeff to move things around if we want to play them at the Angela location. There is just so much going for this deck. I'm very excited about it. Now, again, I said I'm going to pass on Echo, so I might not be able to play it. If you pass on Echo and you're interested in this deck, you can easily replace Echo. It's not a needed card here. You just got to watch out for those ongoing abilities on your opponent's side. But for the most part, this can be a very sneaky list. Next up is Cerebro 2, the good old Cerebro 2. I mean, if a card's going to have 2 power, you got to think about Cerebro 2 because I think it's the best and most consistent way to play Cerebro because you got the blue Marvel buffs and it works all well and nice in tandem together. And basically, that's all I've done. It's just a Cerebro list. It does really well at, restricting your opponent's plays with Goose and a few other things like Iceman. So you just use Echo in there to just further the restrictions for your opponent, work with the synergies of a Cerebro deck, and hope it works out. So I wanted to put that one there. And then lastly, like I was talking about with the Wong combos, you could go any which way with this. This is a pretty standard Wong combo. I put this one here primarily because I think it's quite early game. If you just started or you're in Series 3, there's only a couple of cards here like Dr. Doom, Wong, I believe, are the only Series 3 cards. Echo, if you end up picking up the brand new one. And Nebula I have here, but you could easily replace that with Sunspot. I was torn between the two. So that could be a fun little Wong combo deck because you don't see it anymore. People just realize that Wong can be countered by Cosmo, Enchantress, etc. So at least this takes out the main counter and gives some breath of life to this deck list. So anyways, those are the 3 that I came up with. Another thing I wanted to say is the art styles. Oh my gosh, every single one of these variants above me is absolute fire. Like, I love all of these. The base art I'm not a fan of. I don't like the base art at all, actually. But any one of these, the Rian Gonzalez, the Peach Momoko, oh my gosh, Peach Momoko does not miss. And Maria Wolf, look out for her variants because all the data mine ones I've seen are absolute fire. So Echo's definitely got that going for her. But anyways, there you go. Let me know in the comments below if you're picking up Echo, if there's some crazy synergy maybe that I missed. And thank you so much for watching. I will have the full article in snap.fam, which has a lot more details about these deck lists and a bonus one just for you guys. So thank you, and I'll catch you guys next time.